The crack of the whip, the fedora, the iconic sound of the punch. Indiana Jones has things that make it very much specifically what it is. And when I heard that Machine Games, the creators of a lot of recent Wolfenstein games, was making an action-adventure game in the Indiana Jones franchise, I was intrigued but also a little skeptical. They've made really good shooters. I mean, most of them have been actually very well received. I think one got a little question mark next to it, but overall they've done great in the shooter space. But this is something different. Now, granted, the enemies in Indiana Jones and Wolfenstein line up perfectly, so that makes a lot of sense. But I think with their history, they were kind of allowed to give the chance to branch out, and I'm happy to say that I'm glad they did. What Machine Games has created is truly a spot-on Indiana Jones adventure and journey that you go on with this character, from, scratching your head trying to figure out a puzzle, jumping in your seat when the thrill moments happen, rolling up your sleeves to just get into the meat of this game and experience everything that it has to offer. There's a lot here, and a lot of it that I like. There's a few things that I'd like to, see change or had done differently, but overall, there's a lot of good things in here. And if you hadn't noticed, this is Ebontis right here saying hello, and this is going to be my review for Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Now, just a heads up as well, I was provided the code by Bethesda, so just so you guys are aware of that one up front. And also, with regards to spoilers, I'm not going to spoil how to solve any puzzle. I'm not going to spoil anything story related. I might show a short clip just to show what the cinematics look like, because I want you to see some of the detail to put into these characters, but I don't want to give anything away related to story beats or iconic moments or puzzles or anything like that. So a lot of this is going to be vague discussion about the game and the systems and what I thought about it, without giving away moments that hopefully you're going to get to enjoy on your own. Now, the first thing that I got to talk about, it's the levels. The levels that they created, and I'm only going to talk about the main three, and these are where you're going to spend most of your time anyway. There are other destinations you go to, not going to tell you what they are or why, but the main three are the Vatican, Giza, which is in Egypt with like the pyramids and the Sphinx, and then there's like a swampy area in Siam. Those are the main three destinations that you're going to go to, and I'm going to start with the Vatican because that's probably where I really kind of have my first impressions, and it's where everybody's going to kind of get their first piece in this game. The level they built here is really fitting for, if you picture 1937, all of these destinations seem to feel the time frame very correctly. They did a lot of research, and it shows in a lot of what they did, but the levels on the surface, as you're wandering around, you're like, oh, there's kind of a little secret over here, and maybe here's a little chest with a puzzle. You kind of get the feeling that there's things tucked in corners, but honestly, early on, I had no idea how big these levels were going to be. There's a lot more to each of these major levels than I truly expected. There's a lot more secrets than I really expected to find. Some of the puzzles go from very easy to very intense for difficulty, and overall, the levels themselves are like intricate. They're interconnected in ways that almost remind me of like FromSoft and some of their door opening like awe moments. But also it's the amount of time they spent on the details, the artistry, the work and look of these levels. It is just so well done. Truly chef's kiss. We're talking the Vatican. I got Sistine Chapel, giant marble staircase and stone railings, all the way down to the books on a bookshelf I'm staring at. Everything feels handcrafted, so well fitting for each of the different, like, completely different themes. I mean, we're talking desert, Vatican, swamp, all completely different. It really feels like there was so much care and love and time and detail put into every little bit of these worlds. The handcrafted nature of them feels, I mean, there's no like AI generation here. It feels like this is so much detail and so much love into these levels and worlds that they've created that I really enjoyed my time exploring them, just because of how beautiful they were to look at and how, surprisingly interconnected kind of maze-like structures they were. I was impressed overall with just the worlds that we got to go through, and that's why I wanted to start there, is because some of it is like, I'm going to go on an adventure. Well, you're going to be doing it in some very cool and unique places, and I think very fitting for an Indiana Jones game, but also just very fun to explore and beautiful to look at. Now, when it comes to exploration, you get a decent amount of freedom. Do you want to go inside an enemy camp and try and be stealthy? Do you want to go up on a roof and see what's up on the top? You can do a lot of things, and the game gives you a decent amount of freedom. And overall, I would say it handles a lot of things well. I got to explore and kind of solve a lot of things on my own. Maybe you can, break out of the order of things sometimes. But I will also tell you one thing. I have no idea if the devs are ever going to see this or not. There are moments when you want a game to feel organic, and I think Indiana Jones does a very good job at that, because if you're holding the map or you're holding something or you're in a fight, it all feels about right. I mean, it really feels, especially the first person I'll talk about later, but it feels well done a lot of the time. The organic nature of the exploration, what's over here, happening upon something. But on the flip side of that, there are moments where I'm like, I know this quest, and I'm looking at the map, shows me that I need to go to this area. For whatever reason, I can't go in there. And then later on, I figure out that it was a story beat that somebody's just going to unlock the door for whatever reason. That was a little on the frustrating side to me. There are ways to handle that in a game where if you pick up like a quest, it could say, you need story progression to be able to do this or to get to this destination. Something about that could be like, hey, don't pull your hair out trying to do this right now because you will be able to do it later on. And it's not that they don't want you to do the exploration. I think it would just be nice for it to subtly say, hey, don't do this quest right now because certain things haven't been unlocked for the story. Or you can't get this thing at the moment due to whatever reason. Or you might want to do the side quest now because they're all available to you and we're about to head to a new destination. A couple subtle warnings, but I also know that would take away from the organic nature of the game. But when I was trying every possible direction and angle I could to get into this one area and I couldn't, and then later on after giving up and coming back through story beats later on, I figure out that's how it goes, would have been nice if the game told me. So that's just a me thing, but I will say a lot, that only happened probably like 2 or 3 times, but I will say, being as I spent a decent amount of time trying to figure out if it was possible, it would have been nice to know. But overall, I would say the exploration is well handled. There's a lot of freedom. There's a lot of places you can go. A lot of things you can organically find if you manage your stealth and your disguises and other things. The worlds are really cool to explore, and there's a lot of things to find in there. So I do recommend exploring quite a bit because you never quite know what you're going to find. And when it comes to exploring, there's a lot of stuff to find in these levels. You've got things from books, which are going to help you with progression. You've got like little medicine vials, which are part of a whole kind of ongoing thing. You've got photos and letters and notes and mysteries. There's a lot of stuff to find in this game. Some are going to be tied into your quests. These are going to give you adventure points so you can actually learn stuff from the books that you're going to get. Some of these are going to be tied to the big story, so they can be bigger things. Some are going to be very minor. All of those are going to be variations of stuff that you can do. Those are going to be ways that you get adventure points, but the other way you get adventure points so you can learn from these books, which we'll talk about in a minute, you take photos. And I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but you get a camera early on, and there's certain, like, I would call them like almost engravings or something, basically like plaques that you'll go around and take pictures of for kind of one of the major side quests, I would say. And like, those are cool. You also have the Sistine Chapel, and it prompts you to take a picture of the Sistine Chapel. You get like a little voice dialogue from Indiana Jones about maybe a little history, or you'll see a sculpture and you can take a picture of that and it'll say from this era or whatever. Those are cool moments that very much fit the game. And I think they actually add to the historical exploration and the nature of Indiana Jones and the archaeological persona that he is. Sometimes the photos have you take a picture of a goat. And I am not kidding. I literally had it happen yesterday because I was going through like the checklist to just try and like clean up a destination to try and 100% everything. One of them is a picture of a goat. Another one is a picture of a guy working on a car. Now, you get adventure points from all of these things, and I think some of the ones that are harder to find, like the goat, well, that one gave me like 80 points. There was another one where I had to stand on a certain hill, and then it's when you get, basically when you're taking a picture, you're walking around and you get a little icon in the corner, and it's gonna have a little camera. So at that point, if you stop, pull out the camera, you'll look around, and then eventually the viewfinder is gonna start being like, okay, there's a title, then you gotta focus it right, and maybe move back and forth a little bit. And then when you focus in, you'll take the picture. Well, if I'm taking a picture of an engraving or something, or a sculpture, or this like intricate like model, That's all cool to me. I don't mind that at all. And, you know, have Indiana Jones give me a little history or what this might be from or something. I'm like, okay, cool, fits the character. When I take a picture of a goat and he's like, well, I don't even know if there was a voice line to go with that one, but it gives me like 80 points, and the picture of one of the pyramids in Giza was like 10, doesn't quite seem the same, and it feels like some of this was like padding and filler. So you are going to want to take as many pictures as you can, because they're going to continue to give you adventure points so you can learn all of these books, and there's a fair amount of books. But for me, it was just the idea that not all the pictures should be weighted the same. And if you're going to have me take a picture of goat, please make it not have as many points as the pyramid. I know that's the obvious picture and that's the subtle one, but that doesn't feel like it has the same weight. And you could probably take out the pictures of the pyramids or the car mechanic. And he's got a joke. He's like, I should have somebody look at my brakes when I get back. And that's fine for a little Indiana Jones quip, but it didn't even feel like that one fit. So it's like, I know not every joke is going to land for everybody. That's fine. But the photos at first being like cool, iconic things, later on truly just got to be, there was a fish market in the swamp area in like Siam, and it's just like two people working the fish market. It's like, click, fish market. And it's just, I feel like they were just added later on haphazardly just to give you enough things to get adventure points, and they started to have less meaning. So solving the puzzles, those things I really enjoyed. Taking photos of random stuff that didn't really have much backstory behind it, I think that was one of those for me that just felt like to be more of a chore after a while. Take as many photos as you want, but if you get a chance, you probably should take the photo because the points are going to help you. And those, as I said, help you with the books. Now, the books themselves can do a variety of things. Carry more fruit. Well, if you eat the fruit, you can actually have extra stamina. Maybe you have more health bars. That's going to be pretty big. You can actually combine your health bars, so you can actually kind of get one health bar regenerated. And if it's a big health bar, you get a little bit more health. Sometimes you're able to do more damage in melee combat, or be able to do certain things that you wouldn't be able to otherwise do. So the books really will change how Indiana Jones is capable from early on, feeling like you really got to be stealthy. Every melee encounter is going to make sure you got to block and dodge and all that stuff properly. Later on, I can just like wail on a couple guys. I alert the dude standing next to him, wail on him as well, and I'm totally fine. So you are going to want to try and get your hand on a good amount of these books. Again, if you don't find everything, that's okay. But if you don't explore at all, I do feel like you would probably have some struggles if you don't have the books, because at moderate difficulty, I felt a bit strong. But if you just like golden path this thing and you maybe wanted to try a high difficulty, you're definitely going to probably have some challenges, I would imagine, or you're really going to be trying to do one of those like crazy speedrun playthroughs, like high difficulty, no books or something, who knows. But my point is, when it comes to doing the quests and the puzzles and figuring that stuff out, I enjoyed it. Taking pictures of cool things and getting voice lines of like history, all cool. Taking random pictures of a whole bunch of stuff later on that felt like filler, but still feeling like I need to get all of the books read. That was kind of like the balance I feel like they were kind of losing towards the end. Early on felt okay, later on less so much. So that's just kind of a me thing. The books are cool, but I mean, like when you get stronger, there's no damage numbers or anything. But when I'm at like level 3 for the amount of melee damage I'm going to do, I can really work over a group of enemies coming at me, and you notice the strength. It's just a little less subtle because there's no damage numbers, but you notice how strong you are by the end of the game, and it does make a difference. That's why I recommend exploring a good amount, trying to solve these puzzles, finding as much as you can, because if you want to have some fun and really be able to beat some people up, as Indiana Jones, you're going to be landing some punches and being pretty potent after a while. Now, exploration you're going to handle in many ways. Stealthing through a camp, crawling through like a small tiny tunnel, trying to get to the next room in an underground tomb, swinging across a gap with your whip, and, you know, walking around with a torch, trying to see what you can find in the dark. All of that's like full-on Indiana Jones adventure. But the whip in and of itself, I feel it gets overused for one thing. Combat, it's pretty cool. You know, swinging over the crevices, kind of cool, or the gaps or whatever, that's fine. It's when you're going vertical with the whip, and that's just like a thing that I started to notice the more I had to use it that way. It's like there were no ropes, there were no ladders, the surfaces you couldn't just climb on. It was like, instead of a ladder or a rope here, we're gonna make you use the whip, just because this is Indiana Jones and we have to. Now, I don't mean that in an overall bad way. You just kind of use the whip and you climb up and you go, and it's just one of those things. But like in combat, I can whip it around somebody's ankles and yank them down, or I can hit them in the hand and they drop their weapon. or I can kind of pop them in the face and they're stunned for a second. Those are all fitting moments. Swinging across the gap as well. I actually looked up how many times the whip is used in the movies. I don't know if this website was correct, but it said like 19 times total, and they counted them all. So the fact that I feel like the vertical use of the whip as either a rope or a ladder just feels like it just gets overused at a point, and it's just a mechanic, but it may as well have just been kind of like a grappling hook or a rope or a ladder, and it takes away for me just a little bit of the iconic nature of the whip. It's probably a stupid thing to complain about, and it's not really a complaint, it's just the way the game is designed, and that's totally fine. But it's like, for the whip being iconic, I feel like the kind of vertical traversal of it got overused to a point where it took a little bit away. Still fun to use, don't get me wrong. It was just kind of one of those things that, while it's like I'm whipping somebody in combat and then I'm swinging across a ledge and you're running or whatever, those are all fun. It's just when you're going through, and this may be just trying to like 100% everything, you're climbing up and down, searching through areas, and you're using the same thing, and you just, after a while, you're like, I get it. All right, that's fine. But overall, I would say, like, generally, the exploration and the mobility mechanics is pretty good, which kind of ties into how you get around, and that's in first person. Now, coming into the game, for me, the first person perspective was one of the things I think people asked me about frequently, because I got to do that preview. How does that feel? And I think, honestly, I can say it actually lets the game stand on its own, because the action-adventure genre is third person like everywhere. It is. You know the franchises that I'm talking about. There are big ones out there, small ones, but a lot of it's third person. For whatever reason, that just seems to be a thing. Not many that I can picture have done first person. And I am pleased to say that more often than not, I think it's a good thing. Machine Games handled it well. Like, when you are doing some of those climbing moments, it has to pop out to third person because you're right here next to like some boards you're climbing up. They're not going to create a texture that's like gonna be that high fidelity when you're this close to it. It's not worth it for, you know, them either, or the game trying to load something like that. So that's a moment where it pops out to third person. When you go to swing across, that's another thing where maybe just the movement in the camera was a bit too much, but it pops out to third, and as you land, it pops back into first person. And I think they handle the transitions really smoothly. Like, I never once had like an issue or a bumper. It was handled very well. Overall, I think the first person perspective worked. And when it came to certain moments, like being like an inch from death after sliding down some trap slide or whatever, you couldn't do that in third person and have the same effect that you get in first person. That one moment that I can tell you makes like almost the whole perspective stand out because of that moment. There are certain things that happen in first person because you're so close to them, they stand out. On the other side of that though, when things kind of break, when you have like, when you're doing the Hitman thing and you go to pick up a body and move it, when you're doing that in first person, ragdoll physics are a fun thing in itself, and I'm not blaming them for the ragdoll part, but when you're so close to watching like your head go down and it goes like through a wall for whatever reason, and then when you go to pick up the body's moving in all these weird ways, because you are so close to it, it's a little bit immersion breaking. It's not enough that you're gonna do more than probably laugh at it and move on, but those are the moments where the first person kind of, because you are so close, it amplifies things that otherwise you'd be like, yeah, it's fine. When it comes to like jumping on ledges and invisible walls, this is another moment where if it's third person, you're like, oh, I can't jump up there. Oh no, no big deal. But as you've jumped on so many ledges and things in this game probably by now, you're like, oh, I jumped up here and I made it. And then you're just hitting some wall like straight in the chest. Like, why can I not jump up here? I've made it up here every other time. And it's like, there are some occasional invisible walls. They just stand out a bit more because you're seeing how close in first person you should be able to get up there, and it just doesn't want you to do it here. So it's those moments where it's not enough that I ever say it takes away from the game, but I will say because you are so close to certain things, you notice them more than you would in third person. But it also allows them to amplify certain experiences more because you are so close to them, that I think that payoff is well worth the other side, in my opinion. Biggest thing is it allows you to play as Indiana Jones and not watch Indiana Jones. And I think that's what allows this game to truly be, you know, its own style of adventure. And I appreciate it for that. Now, I touched on the exploration earlier, but the way you explore is going to be different depending on your disguise, the stealth that you need, and that kind of stuff. If you're just running around a level looking for something, there may be a guy, so if you kind of sneak up behind him a little bit, knock him out cold, you're good. Sometimes you need to walk around an enemy camp, and you are either going to be really stealthy, which is like, wait for a patrol, knock a guy out, hide the body out of patrol, wait for the next guy, grab a tool so you can smack him on the back of the head so he goes down quietly and quickly, pop your whip behind a tent so you can have a dog scurry off so you can take the guy on one-on-one. You gotta be a little more careful early on. Later on, if you find a disguise, as a worker, say, you're kind of in that in-between. Certain places you can be, certain cases you can't. And then if you find like a military outfit, there's not much you can't do after that point besides stare a captain in the face. You are pretty free to roam around. Now, you can clean out the camp if you want to, and then at that point, stealth is not really a big deal unless they see a body. But generally, early on, until you find certain disguises, you're going to be stealthing a bit more. And that's kind of where you see the AI kind of not do its thing that great. There are moments where I'm like, I can see a guy, and I know he can see me in his peripheral vision. Like, because I'm looking at his face, like, over here. But, because I'm far enough away for whatever reason, I punch the dude, he's like, ugh! And then he goes down after, like, 1 or 2 punches. I pick up the body, and I'm walking away. I can see this guy's face the entire time. Nothing. Because I'm just outside of his, like, visual radius is here, and I am right here, just outside of it. Now, also, if, as I said, I'm in a disguise and I'm looking at a captain, but then I crouch behind a box, that visual worry, that, like, alertness goes away. Now, they have levels. There's, like, an initial, like, ring that starts to fill. When they get to a question mark, something has happened that caught their attention. When it's exclamation, basically, you know, gloves come off and good luck, because that's usually if you fired a bullet and alerted the entire 6-mile radius around you. One bullet will absolutely ruin your time at some point, because you'll be like, oh, I can totally fire a gun, and then 12 guys come out of nowhere. But on the other side, I can punch a guy, knock him out cold, have him land on the floor, and I swear the guy in the other room didn't hear a thing. So, the AI and the stealth mechanics, they're fine. They work. I didn't try it on high difficulty, as I said, more on the moderate level. I don't know if the high level would be frustrating, or if that's polished. I honestly can't tell you. If you're trying to enjoy the adventure, moderate feels like a good place to probably have a decent time and not pull your hair out. But when you find disguises, they kind of trivialize the stealth, especially the military run. I'm just running circles around these places and nobody cares. So the disguises are definitely worth the searching, and if you do find them, you'll notice the difference of how much you need to kind of care about where you are versus how it feels early on. But sometimes things go sideways. Your disguise doesn't work, you make too much noise, you alert a couple of enemies. Time to box and get in there. There's even underground boxing rings in the game, which is kind of a cool way to practice up your skills. You get to earn a little bit of money that way, which is used for certain things you can buy. But just the general melee system overall, I think they made a good system. And when I got a chance to ask the game director in LA when I was out there for the preview, I was like, what was the hardest thing for you guys to make coming from Wolfenstein to indie? And they said, we're not making a shooter. And as I said, you shoot one bullet, and unless you're just like, I went through a camp and I piled up like 6 guns, and then I fired a bullet just to see how it would be to like take on kind of a small army of guys coming at me. And I survived because, you know, I'd stocked up enough stuff. But generally, firing bullets, absolute last resort. Most of the time, you don't want to do it unless it's like the last 2 guys and you're like, all right, fine, bam, bam. Also, some of the burly guys, like the big ones, square in the face with a rifle more than once. And that's kind of some of the moments where I understand like a pistol to the shoulder or maybe a whip to the leg, you're not going to take the big guy down. But a rifle to the head should still count, because we're talking Indiana Jones here. And if I can punch you 3 times and you go down, I'm pretty sure a rifle should do the same. So that's kind of one of those weird progressions where weapons, they don't feel that strong in the first place, and more often than not, I didn't use them. But weapons aside, back to the boxing. The boxing's legit. Now, it started to get a bit repetitive because mostly it became, it's like, all right, I got somebody who's like ready to punch, go for a block, go for the counter punch, and then usually it was a 1-2 follow-up after that and they were down. It wasn't overly that difficult. Like if you would swing your arm back and kind of charge up your punch and then walk up behind an unsuspecting guy, pop him in the back of the head, it might take 1 more left for a follow-up and he's down. The punching ring was actually pretty cool because they were a bit more fights. We had to get like the block, but it did help you learn the timing. But I think the system they built for not having made something like this previously works. I would love to see what like a version 2, like if they ever did an Indiana Jones second game from the studio, which for many reasons I would actually like to see. Even if it is 5 years from now, it probably would take a while to make. But the system they made works. And as you kind of build up your strength, your health bars, and just also your skill of getting the blocks and the counters, not getting greedy. It's like a FromSoft fight. If you're against a big guy and he just starts throwing punches and you're not blocking, you're going to go down pretty quickly. But if you get to the point where you block, kind of stun him, you can either push him off, go for a couple, or gain some stamina and balance back. Or if you throw the block and then get a counter in there and knock him, and you can get like 1, 2, 3. If they don't go down, then you learn to kind of back up and go for it again. But it does work. And you couldn't do this and have fun with this if first person wasn't here. So the fact that this actually does exist, for me, I think they did a really good job making a system they have never made. And if they get a chance to like kind of refine it maybe for a second time or use it somewhere else, which they very well may, when you make a system like this, it probably won't be the last time you see it. I think overall it's a fun system and you'll be interacting with a lot, and I'm glad this part of it landed because it's a piece of the game you're going to see very frequently. Final thing I'll talk about vaguely is the puzzles. The puzzles in this game, as I kind of stated earlier, there's a big disparity between difficulty. Some are going to be like really just simple. There's a note and then there's a chest and they're basically within the same little barracks tent and it's not that hard to figure out. Some you're going to have to like solve a game puzzle to figure out what's behind them. Some may be halfway across like the level and you've picked up a note, and all I will tell you is if you do pick up a note and there's a code on it and it's not really near anything, write that down somewhere, take a picture of it on your phone, some way make a note of that so you don't have to go searching through your 50 notes and pictures later. If you just have like a couple notes, you're like, oh, use that one, still haven't used this one, and I found a random chest, try it, might be the one you're looking for. But when it comes to the puzzles, they have some pretty intricate ones, some brain teasers. Nothing was overly that difficult, but I do think a couple of the final ones are probably going to be a bit of a head scratcher moment. I don't think I struggled too much with any of like the mechanics or the puzzles or the room, like spatial puzzles for very long. I had one where I bounced an idea off a friend and we kind of figured that one out. But overall, nothing was like too difficult to figure out. But there are a few that are obscure, and there are a few that are kind of cakewalk, and then there's some when you're just like, the light bulb moment kind of makes you like, I should have thought of that like an hour ago kind of thing. But they're all levels and scales. I'm sure there will be guides that solves every puzzle in no time, but my recommendation, give them a shot, like blind, because I think a lot of them are decent to figure out, especially if you have the surrounding information. Some you can't figure out without the information. So if you don't have the information, you're just like guessing, probably not the best way to try and figure out a code. But if you have the information in front of you and you have like, I have 2 of 2 items for this mystery, I have the information here, I just need to figure it out. That's when I would say probably give it a shot for a little while, see if you can come to it, because it's normally like not too far away from where you're thinking. They're not the craziest, but there are a couple, whether it's like the spatial, like doing something in a room, like those type of like puzzles where you have to move objects, interact things. They don't take too much effort, but a couple were like not quite how I expected them to go. But overall, I would say the figuring stuff out was pretty well done across the whole game. Variation of difficulty and stuff was nice to see in there. Some easier, some harder. Nice pacing, I think, on the puzzles too. Nothing was too crazy all the time, but nothing was also too easy all the time. So overall, I think the puzzles in the game were a good fit for the adventure that you went on. Final piece for me is just some technical things. One, there's no manual save in this game. Now, as you run around, you'll see the little hat icon show up in the corner. That's basically this. It's saving, but it's an autosave thing. And I feel like it's like location based more often than not. But if you're sitting there staring at a puzzle for 30 minutes and then you like turn the game off or something, it might have not have saved that. Now, granted, you might not have probably lost too much progress, but I will also tell you, if you revisit locations, make sure you move around enough to save before you go to another destination. You don't want to like solve a puzzle and book it and like then fast travel, because then it may not actually count what you picked up. So just be aware, look for that save icon before you fast travel, before you kind of move destinations. The autosave generally is pretty good. I didn't have too many issues where I was like fighting it, but every so often it would have been nice just to have a manual save moment. I understand they don't want you to save scum because they want the game to feel a bit more organic, and it really didn't come up that often. I don't think I would have lost out on more than maybe a minute or two of like progress or moving around, so it's not that big a deal. Just wanted to make you guys aware of it. I ran it on PC. I was on 5950X and a 3090, and I've got like 64 gig of RAM because videos and stuff, but it generally ran pretty well. I put it on DLSS. I run it on a 4K monitor. Capped it at 60 frames because I'm recording the video anyway, and it was generally locked up at 60 frames most of the time. Now, there are moments where it dropped so hard down to like 8 frames, and it was these moments where I feel like the game was saving, and then also maybe loading a transition. When it did those two occasionally at the same time, it chugged frames so bad. As I said, I saw single digits up in the corner. But most of the time, outside of those weird little transition moments that just don't seem optimized, everything else ran really quite well. Boxing matches, exploring, fighting, enemy camp, never really experienced anything there. Smooth as can be. It was just truly transitions, maybe a connection of one section to another, also when it auto-saves on top. Just that combination of elements is where I had my frames go. Truly, I saw like 8, 7, 6, and then it would ramp back up, and you're good to go. So it's not anything that's going to like be an effect on your gameplay, and I don't think it's ever going to draw away from that, but those moments for me were happening, and maybe that's an optimization patch that comes later. But whether I was capturing, and then I did try later without, occasionally those came up, and they were quite noticeable when they did happen. But outside of those moments, which were not in anything important, ran very well, no crashes. I do have one kind of progression buggish thing, but it's so minor right now, and I think somebody else has it too. That may be a small patch that gets fixed later on, but that's like trying to 100% the game kind of stuff. All the story stuff, all the main, like everything, honestly, generally ran well. And I had a very smooth experience. It actually is kind of one of those in a preview setting before, like, you know, final day one patch and final graphics drivers might be there. I think they did a great job giving us a game for even preview mode that I didn't run into anything major, because I've had some of those that have happened in the past. So technically, overall, I think the game is in a pretty sound state. A few minor tweaks here and there, because there's always probably a few bugs, but generally running very well and generally pretty smooth outside of those transitions. But those hit hard, so I had to call them out. Last but absolutely not least, and mainly I'm putting this at the end to avoid any type of spoiler type thing, and I'm still not going to spoil anything, but when it comes to the story, the cinematics, the voice acting, the characters that you interact with, all of that is extremely well done. The motion capture in the faces, the detail. I mean, when you look at Indiana Jones' jacket in some of these cutscenes, I'm like, that is his leather jacket. Absolutely nailed. And the fedora. He almost looks weird with a hat off at some points, but those aren't that often. But also the voice work. Troy Baker, I don't think you could have found anybody besides Troy to try and do this. And I've listened to podcasts with Troy Baker on it, and I have a good idea what he sounds like. Occasionally, I'm going to pick him up in there because nobody's immune to that because they have a real voice. But I will tell you, in like the thrilling moments and like kind of the more emotional and heightened moments as Indiana Jones, I'm like, dude, you are just absolutely spot on nailing this voice work right now. So I don't know if they could have found anybody better, to be completely honest, and I think he did an excellent job. The main villain as well, such excellent work, such kind of a quirky guy, but also just, I mean, when you're working with the Nazi regime and all of these things and just totally holding your own and almost laughing in their faces, the like sociopathic villain, very well done, but to a point that it's, you know, a little bit more mental between him and Indiana and those type of moments. I really appreciated the story and the journey, the side characters that we had. His love interest is there, and like some of the emotional moments that you go through there, and then a couple other characters which I don't want to get into, but the actual story and adventure, you get 4 hours of cutscenes in here. Now, they're not all specifically related to like the big arc, but there's a lot of cinematics in here, and you get to basically watch an Indiana Jones movie while you play an Indiana Jones game as Indiana Jones. And I know that's saying Indiana Jones a lot, but it is watching, playing, and being, because of that first person perspective, that really brings this all together to be an excellent adventure. And for me, my overall rating on the game may sound a little low from how I'm talking about things, but it's just kind of where I'm landing. It's an 8 out of 10 to me. What that means to you, everybody's going to have different opinions. If I was going to lean in a direction, like if I'm leaning on a whole number, but it would lean higher, like an 8+. I don't think it quite makes it to a 9 for some of the things I have mentioned, little nitpicks here and there that I have, whatever it may be. But but I also think 7 is too low in my opinion. I don't think that does it enough justice. So an 8 out of 10 for me is a great game. It truly is a worthwhile experience, fun, challenging, visually beautiful to look at, and, you know, great level design, cool story to experience, and a fun time overall. What is a game supposed to be? It's meant to be fun. And I think if you are looking for an Indiana Jones action-adventure game, you are probably going to have a great time as you play through this thing, and that's why I gave it the score that I did. So I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope it answered some questions. Maybe it steered you to playing it, or maybe it told you something that might be a deal breaker for you. But overall, I think if you are looking forward to this game, you are going to be pleasantly surprised. And if Indiana Jones is your thing, you're going to have a blast. Thank you guys for checking out this review. Thank you again, Bethesda, for the code. And I look forward to seeing you guys soon. But I had a great time, and I hope you do as well if you play.